Samantha had always been haunted by the memories of her childhood. She had grown up in a violent and abusive home, and the horrors she had witnessed had left her scarred and traumatized. As she grew older, she tried to put the past behind her and move on with her life. She went to college, made new friends, and tried to be happy. But the memories wouldn't stay buried. They haunted her every waking moment, creeping into her dreams and driving her to the brink of madness. One night, as she lay in bed, she heard a voice calling to her. It was a voice she recognized, the voice of her father, the man who had inflicted so much pain and suffering on her. She tried to ignore the voice, but it grew louder and more insistent. It called to her from the darkness, beckoning her to come closer. Samantha knew she had to face her fears and confront the past if she wanted to find peace. So she followed the voice, her footsteps echoing in the empty corridors. As she reached the end of the corridor, she saw her father standing in front of her, his face twisted in a grotesque expression of anger and hatred. And as she looked into his glowing eyes, she knew that she was not alone in the darkness. The past had come back to haunt her. The air was thick with the smell of decay as Sarah made her way through the abandoned hospital. She had heard rumors that the place was haunted, but she didn't believe in ghosts. She was just there to explore and take some pictures for her blog. As she walked through the empty corridors, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. She heard strange noises and saw shadows moving in the corners of her eyes, but whenever she turned to look, there was nothing there. Finally, she reached the basement, where the morgue was located. She had always been fascinated by death, and she wanted to see the cold, stainless steel tables where the bodies were kept. As she entered the room, she saw a figure standing in the corner. Sarah stood there, frozen with fear as she stared into the woman's haunted eyes. She wanted to run, but her legs wouldn't move. She couldn't tear her gaze away from the woman's twisted face. Suddenly, the woman spoke, her voice low and rasping. "Help me," she whispered. "Please, don't leave me here to die." Sarah's heart raced as she listened to the woman's plea. She knew she had to do something, but she didn't know what. She looked around the room, searching for a way to escape. That's when she saw it, a door in the corner of the room, half hidden behind a shelf. It was a faint glimmer of hope, and Sarah knew she had to take the chance. She tore her gaze away from the woman and stumbled towards the door, her heart pounding in her chest. She fumbled with the handle, her hands shaking with fear. Finally, the door opened and Sarah stumbled through, slamming it shut behind her. She collapsed to the ground, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She knew she had to keep moving, but she was too terrified to stand. She crawled through the dark, narrow corridors, her hands and knees scraping against the rough concrete floor. She had no idea where she was going, but she knew she had to get as far away from the hospital as possible. She could hear the sound of footsteps behind her, getting closer and closer. She knew the woman was coming for her, and she knew she had to run. Sarah forced herself to stand and began to run, her legs pumping beneath her as she raced towards the exit. She could hear the sound of the woman's voice behind her, beckoning her to stay, but she didn't stop. Finally, she burst out of the hospital and into the cold, clear air. She fell to her knees, sobbing with relief. She had made it out alive, but she knew she would never forget the horrors she had seen inside. It was Christmas Eve, and Alice was looking forward to spending the holiday with her family. They had always been close, and she loved the traditions they shared during the festive season, but as the evening wore on, Alice began to feel a creeping sense of unease. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, that something was watching her from the shadows. She tried to brush it off as her imagination, but the feeling only seemed to grow stronger. And as the night went on, strange things began to happen. Ornaments on the tree started moving on their own, and the lights flickered and strobed in a disorienting pattern. Alice couldn't explain it, but she knew that it wasn't just her imagination. She tried to tell her family, but they just laughed it off and told her to stop being silly. But Alice knew that she wasn't crazy, that something was wrong. As the hours ticked by, the strange occurrences became more and more intense. Alice's mind was filled with dark and twisted thoughts, her own worst fears and anxieties playing out in her head. She couldn't take it anymore. She screamed and begged for it to stop, but no one seemed to hear her. She was trapped in her own mind, a prisoner of the terrifying psychological horror that was consuming her, and as Christmas morning dawned, Alice knew that she would never be the same again. I hope this horror story gave you a sense of the terror and uncertainty. Keep in mind that this is just a story and there is nothing to be afraid of. If you enjoy horror stories, be sure to like, share, and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss out on any new releases.